The neon lights of Nexus Station's main cantina cast dancing shadows across hundreds of alien faces, but none were more terrifying than the creature that sat in the darkest corner. Kethmore the Shadowbane was a living nightmare made real. His massive frame stretched nearly 8 feet tall, covered in jet-black scales that seemed to absorb light itself. 4 glowing yellow eyes moved independently across his reptilian skull, each one capable of tracking different targets simultaneously. When he shifted slightly in his chair, the soft scraping sound of his razor-sharp claws against metal made nearby patrons unconsciously step away. For 300 years, Kethmore had been the galaxy's most feared hunter. His trophy room back on the shadow world of Vextar contained the preserved remains of creatures that had once terrorized entire star systems. The crystalline horn of a Centauri ice demon hung next to the electrified tentacles of a Proxima Storm beast. Skeletal remains of psychic predators from the Veil Nebula were displayed alongside the petrified carapaces of hive queens that had once commanded armies of millions. Every kill had been methodical, precise, and absolutely brutal. Kethmore didn't just hunt for sport or survival. He hunted to prove his superiority over every living thing in the known universe. His reputation was so fearsome that entire species had gone into hiding when word spread that the Shadowbane was active in their sector. Pirate fleets changed course rather than risk encountering him. Military commanders issued warnings to avoid any ship bearing his distinctive black and gold markings. But tonight, Kethmore was focused on what should have been his easiest target yet. Across the crowded cantina, sitting alone at a small table near the viewing port, was a single human male. According to the hunter's research, the creature called itself Jin-Ho Park. The identification documents listed him as a simple cargo hauler, running routine supply missions between the inner colonies and frontier outposts. Kethmore's 4 eyes studied every detail of his prey. The human was unremarkable in every way that mattered to a predator. No natural armor covered his soft pink skin, no claws extended from his blunt fingertips, no fangs protruded from his small mouth. His eyes faced forward like a predator's, but they lacked the enhanced vision that allowed most hunters to see in complete darkness or track heat signatures across vast distances. The alien hunter's research files contained extensive data on human physiology and behavior. They were classified as a mid-tier species at best. Humans possessed average intelligence and had developed basic tool-making abilities, but they lacked any of the natural weapons that made for interesting prey. Their muscle density was laughably low compared to most galactic species. Their reflexes were slower than a Rigelian tree sloth. Their lifespan was so brief that most didn't live long enough to develop any real survival skills. Most damning of all, humans were pack animals. They relied entirely on group cooperation and primitive technology to survive. Isolated from their herds and stripped of their tools, they became helpless. Kethmore had read reports from other hunters who described humans as disappointingly fragile and barely worth the effort to track. This particular human fit the profile perfectly. Jin-Ho sat alone, sipping some kind of amber liquid from a plain glass. His clothing was simple and practical, the kind of rough work clothes worn by countless freight haulers throughout the galaxy. His ship's manifest, which Kethmore had easily accessed through the station's poorly secured network, listed nothing but basic medical supplies bound for a mining colony in the Outer Rim. The hunter's mandibles clicked softly in anticipation. After 3 centuries of stalking the galaxy's most dangerous predators, he was actually looking forward to an easy hunt. This human would be a simple trophy to round out his collection before he considered retirement. No elaborate planning would be necessary. No advanced weapons or tactics, just a straightforward stalk and kill. Jin-Ho finished his drink and stood up slowly, stretching his back like someone who had spent too many hours in a cramped cockpit. He left a few credits on the table and walked casually toward the exit that led to the docking bays. The human moved with the unhurried pace of someone who had no idea death was following, just a few steps behind. Kethmore rose from his corner table, his massive form moving with surprising silence despite his size. Several alien patrons glanced in his direction and quickly looked away, recognizing the predatory grace of a born killer. The hunter's 4 eyes tracked his target, while his other senses automatically catalogued every potential escape route, every hiding spot, every advantage the cramped space station might offer. This was going to be disappointingly easy. The cargo ship Lucky Strike hummed quietly through hyperspace, its aging engines maintaining a steady rhythm that had lulled countless passengers to sleep over the years. But Kethmore wasn't sleeping. The massive alien hunter had spent 3 days studying every inch of the vessel, memorizing its layout, identifying weak points, and planning his attack. His natural cloaking ability bent light around his obsidian scales, making him nearly invisible. As he moved through the cramped corridors like a living shadow, this should have been the easiest kill of his 300-year career. The ship was small, barely large enough for a crew of 2. There were no escape pods, no weapon systems, nowhere for his prey to run. Jin-Ho Park was trapped in a metal box floating through the void, completely at the mercy of the galaxy's most deadly predator. Kethmore had planned to make it quick. One swift strike to sever the human's spine, then collect his trophy and be done with it. But something felt wrong from the moment he began his final approach. The corridors were too quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of someone sleeping, but the tense silence of a predator waiting in ambush. Kethmore's 4 eyes scanned constantly as he moved, his enhanced senses searching for any sign of his target. The human's scent trail led toward the cargo hold, but it seemed strangely faint, as if Jin-Ho had been deliberately masking his presence. When the first emergency light flickered and died, Kethmore barely noticed. Ship systems failed all the time in these older vessels, but then another light went out, and another. Within minutes, entire sections of the corridor were plunged into absolute darkness. The hunter's night vision was excellent, but even he needed some ambient light to see clearly. As more systems began failing around him, Kethmore realized this wasn't random mechanical failure. Someone was systematically shutting down the ship's power grid, section by section, corridor by corridor. The ventilation system groaned to a halt with a sound like dying machinery. The constant background hum of air recyclers fell silent. In the sudden quiet, Kethmore could hear his own breathing echoing off the metal walls. His prey was somewhere in this maze of darkened passages, but for the first time in centuries, the hunter wasn't sure who was stalking whom. A soft sound from the cargo hold caught his attention. It was barely audible, just the whisper of fabric against metal, but Kethmore's predator instincts locked onto it immediately. His cloaked form moved silently down the final corridor, razor-sharp claws extended and ready to strike. The cargo hold's main door was slightly ajar, pale light spilling. Through the gap, Kethmore could see a human silhouette inside, apparently working at one of the storage containers. Jin-Ho's back was turned, completely unaware of the death approaching from behind. The hunter gathered himself for the killing strike, his powerful legs coiled like springs. His claws gleamed in the dim light, every muscle in his massive frame prepared to unleash 3 centuries of refined killing technique on this helpless human. Kethmore burst through the doorway with lightning speed, his claws aimed directly at Jin-Ho's neck. But instead of slicing through soft human flesh, his talons passed harmlessly through empty air. The figure he had been watching flickered and vanished like smoke. A holographic projection, the explosion came from directly beneath his feet. The blast wasn't large enough to destroy the ship, but it didn't need to be. Jin-Ho had positioned the improvised device perfectly, using salvaged components from the ship's own systems to create a directed charge that focused all its energy upward. Hundreds of metal fragments tore through Kethmore's supposedly impenetrable scales like they were made of paper. Purple ichor sprayed across the cargo hold walls as the hunter crashed to the deck, howling in pain and rage. His left arm hung useless at his side, shredded by shrapnel. Deep cuts across his torso leaked alien blood onto the metal floor. For the first time in 300 years, Kethmore the Shadowbane was wounded and bleeding, but the physical damage was nothing compared to the psychological shock. How had a simple human cargo hauler anticipated his attack? How had Jin-Ho known exactly where he would strike and when? The trap had been perfect, timed to the second, positioned with surgical precision. As emergency lighting flickered back to life throughout the ship, Kethmore realized the terrifying truth. His helpless prey had turned the entire vessel into a weapon. Every system failure, every darkened corridor, every apparently random malfunction had been carefully orchestrated. The human hadn't been running or hiding. He had been preparing. Jin Ho's voice echoed through the ship's communication system, calm and professional. "I know you're not dead yet," the human said quietly. "Your species is tougher than that, but you're hurt, confused, and probably wondering how a primitive human managed to surprise the great Kethmore, the Shadowbane." The hunter struggled to his feet, purple blood still dripping from his wounds. His 4 eyes burned with fury, but beneath the rage was something he hadn't felt in centuries: fear. "The answer is simple," Jin Ho continued. "You made the same mistake every predator makes when they hunt humans. You assumed we were prey." The mining station Epsilon 4 hung in the void like a massive mechanical spider, its industrial arms stretching out to harvest asteroids from the surrounding belt. Kethmore had followed Jin Ho here, expecting to corner his prey in the isolated facility. But as his wounded form stumbled through the docking bay, purple ichor still seeping from his shrapnel wounds, the hunter began to realize he had walked into something far more dangerous than a simple mining operation. The station should have been bustling with activity. Instead, it was eerily quiet. No mining crews loading ore, no supervisors barking orders, no maintenance workers scurrying between the massive processing units. Just the constant hum of automated systems and the distant rumble of asteroid crushers working deep in the facility's core. Kethmore's 4 eyes scanned the empty corridors as he tracked Jin Ho's scent through the maze of industrial equipment. The human was moving deeper into the station, leading him through maintenance tunnels barely wide enough for the hunter's massive frame. Every step forward felt like descending into a trap, but Kethmore's pride wouldn't let him retreat. No prey had ever escaped him. No quarry had ever made him bleed and lived to tell about it. The first conveyor belt activated just as Kethmore rounded a corner. Massive chunks of processed ore began rolling toward him at tremendous speed, each piece weighing several tons. The hunter leaped aside, his injured arms screaming in protest, but the corridor was narrow and there was nowhere to go. He pressed himself against the wall as the deadly cargo thundered past, missing him by inches. "Interesting reaction time," Jin Ho's voice crackled through the station's communication system. The human sounded completely calm, almost clinical. "Most predators would have tried to fight their way through, but you recognized the futility and chose evasion. Very practical." Kethmore snarled at the speakers mounted in the ceiling. How was this human watching him? The station's security cameras should have been easy to disable, but somehow Jin Ho seemed to be tracking his every movement. The hunter pressed forward, following the scent trail through a series of processing chambers. Massive hydraulic presses, designed to compress asteroid fragments into manageable blocks, lined both sides of the corridor. They should have been dormant, waiting for the next shift of workers to activate them. Instead, they began slamming down with earth-shaking force the moment Kethmore entered the chamber. The timing was perfect, too perfect. Each press activated just as the hunter approached, forcing him to dodge and weave between tons of crushing metal. One hydraulic ram missed his head by mere centimeters, the displaced air ruffling his obsidian scales. Another slammed down behind him so close that he could feel the vibration through the deck plating. "How your species relies heavily on superior physical attributes," Jin Ho's voice continued, still maddeningly calm. "Enhanced strength, natural armor, improved reflexes. But you're not as fast as you think you are. The press sequence was calculated based on your average movement speed. I could have crushed you 3 times already if I wanted to." The hunter's rage burned hotter with each word. This human was toying with him, demonstrating superiority in the most humiliating way possible. Kethmore had never been the prey before. He had never been hunted, studied, analyzed like a specimen in a laboratory. The maintenance tunnel grew narrower as he pushed deeper into the station. His shoulders scraped against the walls, limiting his movement. Behind him, the sound of machinery grew louder as more systems activated. Conveyor belts began moving in complex patterns, creating a maze of crushing hazards that made retreat impossible. "You're wondering how I know so much about your hunting methods," Jin Ho said, as Kethmore, Squeeze through another tight passage. The answer is simple. I've been studying you for months. Your attack patterns, your preferred killing techniques, even your psychological profile. Did you really think you were the only one capable of research? The tunnel opened into a vast chamber filled with ore processing equipment. Massive grinders capable of reducing solid rock to powder lined the walls. Magnetic separators, strong enough to pull metal fragments from across the room, hummed with barely contained energy. And everywhere, security cameras tracked Kethmore's movements with mechanical precision. You see, Kethmore the Shadowbane, humans have one advantage that your research files never mentioned, Jinho continued. We don't just adapt to our environment, we remake it to suit our needs. This entire station has been modified for one purpose, to kill you. A grinding wheel the size of a small building roared to life directly in front of the hunter. The sound was deafening, drowning out everything else. Sparks flew as the massive diamond-tipped surface began rotating at incredible speed. Kethmore could feel the heat from the friction washing over his scales. Every corridor has been calculated to channel you toward specific kill zones, the human explained, his voice somehow cutting through the industrial noise. Every piece of equipment has been reprogrammed to activate at precise moments. You're not hunting me anymore, Kethmore. You're a rat in a maze, and I'm the scientist running the experiment. The hunter's 4 eyes burned with fury as he realized the full scope of the trap. This wasn't a chance encounter. Jinho hadn't simply been unlucky enough to cross paths with the galaxy's most dangerous predator. The human had deliberately made himself a target, using himself as bait to lure Kethmore into this industrial death trap. The question now, Jinho said softly, is whether the great Shadowbane is smart enough to figure out how to survive what comes next. Behind Kethmore, the maintenance tunnel sealed itself with a grinding of metal on metal. Ahead, the processing equipment began moving in complex patterns, creating new hazards with each passing second. He was trapped in a mechanical maze designed by a human mind that had studied every aspect of his existence. For the first time in 3 centuries, Kethmore the Shadowbane was afraid. Blood loss and exhaustion had finally taken their toll on Kethmore's massive frame. The hunter's obsidian scales were cracked and dulled, purple ichor still seeping from dozens of wounds inflicted by the station's deadly machinery. His breathing came in ragged gasps as he dragged himself through the final corridor leading to Epsilon 4's central hub. Every step was agony, but his predator's pride refused to let him collapse. He had survived 3 hours of mechanical hell. Crushing presses, grinding wheels, conveyor belts loaded with razor-sharp ore fragments, all of it designed to kill him in the most brutal ways imaginable. But Kethmore was still alive, still hunting, still determined to claim his prize. No human would defeat the galaxy's apex predator. The central hub was a vast spherical chamber at the heart of the mining station. Massive viewports offered a panoramic view of the asteroid field beyond, while countless control panels and displays lined the curved walls. At the center of it all stood a single figure, Jinho Park, exactly where Kethmore had expected to find him. The human appeared completely calm. His hands rested casually on the main control console, fingers dancing across holographic displays. With practiced ease, he wasn't running anymore, he wasn't hiding, he was simply waiting like a teacher, preparing for a lesson. Finally, Jinho said without turning around, I was beginning to wonder if you'd make it this far. The odds weren't in your favor after that encounter with the plasma cutters in Sector 7. Kethmore's 4 eyes blazed with hatred as he raised his claws for the killing strike. After everything this human had put him through, he would make the death slow and painful. He would savor every moment of revenge. Before you do something you'll regret, Jinho continued, still focused on his displays. Let me introduce myself properly. Captain Jinho Park, Human Defense Corps, Special Operations Division, serial number HDF 7731 Alpha. Tactical specialization, asymmetric warfare and xeno-threat elimination. The words hit Kethmore like a physical blow. Special operations, the human military's elite forces, trained specifically to fight enemies with superior physical capabilities. Suddenly, everything made sense. The perfect traps, the precise timing, the systematic dismantling of every advantage the hunter possessed. The medical supplies in my cargo manifest were military-grade surveillance equipment, Jin-Ho explained, finally turning to face his pursuer. "Quantum sensors, behavioral analysis software, tactical prediction algorithms. I've been tracking alien hunters like you for 8 months now. Learning your methods, studying your weaknesses, preparing countermeasures." Jin-Ho's fingers moved across the control panel with surgical precision. Throughout the station, atmospheric processors hummed to life. The air itself began to change, becoming thick and heavy with industrial compounds that Kethmore's lungs couldn't filter. His natural respiratory system, designed to process the toxic atmosphere of his homeworld, was completely useless against synthetic chemicals tailored specifically to target his species' biology. "Kosi, Kethmore, humans have been fighting superior predators since we first crawled out of caves on Earth," the human continued conversationally. "We've never been the strongest, fastest, or most naturally armed species, but we've always been the most adaptable." The hunter's vision began to blur as the toxic atmosphere took effect. His 4 eyes watered, and his breathing became even more labored. But worse than the physical discomfort was the growing realization that he had been completely outmaneuvered from the very beginning. Mining lasers designed to carve through solid asteroid rock began activating throughout the chamber. But instead of random destruction, they moved in precise patterns, their brilliant beams creating geometric shapes in the air around Kethmore. The hunter tried to dodge, but his weakened state made him clumsy and predictable. Every movement he made seemed anticipated, as if Jin-Ho was reading his mind. "Predictive behavioral modeling," the human explained, watching the laser patterns adjust in real time. "Your species follows very specific movement patterns when injured and disoriented. The computer has calculated your next 17 possible actions with 93% accuracy. You're not fighting me anymore, Kethmore. You're fighting pure mathematics." The lasers weren't trying to kill him, the hunter realized with growing horror. They were herding him, forcing him to move in specific directions like a piece of livestock, being guided to slaughter. Every step he took was exactly where Jin-Ho wanted him to go. "The funny thing about apex predators," Jin-Ho said, his voice carrying easily over the industrial noise, "is that they always assume they're at the top of the food chain. But humans learned long ago that the most dangerous predator isn't necessarily the strongest one. It's the one that can remake the rules of the hunt." Electromagnetic fields began pulsing through the chamber floor, disrupting Kethmore's nervous system and causing muscle spasms throughout his massive frame. His natural cloaking ability flickered and failed completely. His enhanced senses became unreliable, feeding him false information about distances and threats. "Every biological advantage you possess has a technological counter," Jin-Ho continued, adjusting the field intensity with clinical precision. "Your natural armor is useless against targeted electromagnetic disruption. Your enhanced vision becomes a liability when exposed to specific light frequencies. Your superior strength means nothing when your nervous system stops responding to conscious control." Kethmore crashed to his knees, his body betraying him completely. For 3 centuries, he had relied on physical superiority to dominate his prey. Now reduced to helplessness by human technology and tactical planning, he finally understood what it meant to be truly hunted. "The question now," Jin-Ho said quietly, "is whether the galaxy's most feared hunter is ready to learn what it feels like to be prey." The lasers continued their deadly dance, and Kethmore realized with absolute certainty that his hunting days were over. The reactor chamber at Epsilon 4's core was a cathedral of raw power. Massive energy conduits snaked along the walls like glowing arteries, feeding the station's hungry systems with fusion fire hot enough to melt starship hulls. In the center of it all, a containment field held back forces that could crack planets in half. This was where Jin-Ho had led the galaxy's most feared hunter for their final confrontation. Kethmore stumbled into the chamber, his massive frame barely able to support itself. The toxic atmosphere had ravaged his respiratory system, and electromagnetic pulses had left his muscles twitching uncontrollably, but he was still alive, still dangerous, and still determined to kill the human who had humiliated him so completely. "Welcome to the heart of the beast," Jin-Ho said calmly, standing beside the main reactor controls. His human form looked impossibly small against the towering machinery, but his presence dominated the entire space. "This is where we end our little dance, Kethmore. One way or another." The hunter's four eyes blazed with the last remnants of his fury. "You think your tricks and machines make you my equal human? I am 300 years old. I have killed things that would drive your species insane with terror. You are nothing but clever prey." Jinho's expression didn't change. If anything, he looked almost sad. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that brought you to this moment. You see tools and technology as crutches for the weak. But humans learned long ago that intelligence is the ultimate weapon, not because it makes us stronger, but because it makes our enemies weaker." The human's fingers moved across the reactor controls with practiced precision. Throughout the chamber, magnetic field generators began shifting their alignment. The contained, fusion reaction at the chamber's heart pulsed with increasing intensity, its light growing brighter with each passing second. "Your species evolved on a high-gravity death world," Jinho continued conversationally, as if discussing the weather. "Your nervous system developed to handle massive electromagnetic interference from your planet's magnetic storms. It's actually quite remarkable how your biology adapted to such harsh conditions." Kethmore felt the energy fields in the chamber beginning to shift. The constant background hum of the reactor changed pitch, becoming something that resonated deep in his bones. "What are you doing?" "Creating a very specific electromagnetic signature," Jinho replied. "You see, I spent months studying your species' biology. Not just the obvious things like strength and speed, but the subtle vulnerabilities that evolution built into your system. Your nervous system might be resistant to natural electromagnetic interference, but it's actually hypersensitive to artificial patterns." The hunter tried to charge forward, claws extended for a killing strike, but his legs betrayed him, muscles seizing as precisely tuned energy pulses disrupted the electrical signals from his brain. He crashed to the deck, limbs twitching as his own nervous system turned against him. "Every biological system has flaws," Jinho explained, adjusting the field intensity with surgical precision. "Your enhanced reflexes rely on rapid nerve conduction. Disrupt that with the right frequency, and your greatest asset becomes your greatest weakness. Your natural armor conducts electricity beautifully once you know the proper wavelength. Your four-chambered heart has a very specific rhythm that can be triggered into dangerous arrhythmia." Kethmore's vision blurred as his cardiovascular system began failing. The hunter who had terrorized 17 star systems was reduced to gasping. Helplessly on the deck like a beached sea creature, every breath was agony, every heartbeat felt like it might be his last. "This is what humans do," Jinho said quietly, his voice cutting through the reactor's growing roar. "We don't just fight our enemies. We study them until we understand them better than they understand themselves. Then we use that knowledge to make them obsolete." The paralysis spread through Kethmore's massive frame until only his eyes could move. But those four yellow orbs burned with something the hunter had never experienced before, absolute primal terror. For the first time in 3 centuries, he truly understood what it meant to be helpless prey. Jinho knelt beside the fallen hunter, his expression calm but not cruel. "I'm going to let you live, Kethmore. Not out of mercy, but because I need you to deliver a message. When you return to whatever dark corner of the galaxy spawned you, I want you to tell every hunter, every predator, every species that thinks humans are easy prey exactly what happened here." The electromagnetic field intensity decreased just enough to allow basic motor function. Kethmore could breathe again, though each inhalation felt like swallowing molten metal. His limbs twitched back to partial life, but the memory of complete helplessness would haunt him forever. "Tell them that humans don't run from hunters," Jinho continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "We study them, we learn their weaknesses, and we make them extinct, not through superior strength or natural weapons, but through patience, intelligence, and the willingness to turn any environment into a weapon." The human stood and walked toward the chamber exit, leaving Kethmore broken and gasping on the reactor room floor. "Tell them that Earth's children aren't prey at all. We're the universe's most patient and methodical predator species, and we've just begun to hunt." Within a standard year, Kethmore's warning had spread throughout every major hunter's guild. In known space, humans were reclassified from mid-tier prey to forbidden quarry. The galaxy's apex predator, spent his remaining centuries in exile, forever marked by the knowledge that somewhere in the vast darkness, humanity was watching, learning, and preparing for the next hunter, foolish enough to test their resolve. The hunt was over, but the real terror had just begun.